Welcome to Life with David. I'm David, and today I'm continuing the repair of my 1968 Volkswagen Karmann Ghia engine. In the previous video, we removed the engine and discovered why the valves were going out of adjustment so quickly. Then I reassembled the engine, but I'll skip that part for now. I had to remove the engine again because of overheating issues. However, before I removed the engine for the second time, I tried to resolve the overheating issues while the engine was still in the car. These in-car fixes didn't completely solve the overheating, but they helped. So why don't you join me as I try to fix my engine overheating issues while the engine is still in the car? I'd like to spend a moment on safety. There's nothing more important than keeping you and your loved ones safe. Be sure to read, understand, and follow the safety rules for your tools. Using your tools properly will greatly reduce the risk of personal injury. And always use the appropriate eye, hearing, and respiratory personal protective equipment. In this video, we are working with all kinds of things that can hurt you. You can burn and pinch yourself, so keep your head in the game. If you're following along, you're doing so at your own risk. Make sure you have a good Volkswagen manual like John Muir's How to Keep Your Volkswagen Alive or a Bentley or Hayes guide. And if you don't feel comfortable doing any of these activities, then don't. Now let's get started. If you're following along, I'm already up to 5 fails, but here comes the biggest fail of all. After I assembled the engine, I set the valve latch. However, the number 1 cylinder push rod wasn't seated in the lifter, so when I started the engine, it banged against the rocker arm and hammered the number 1 lower rear cylinder head stud. It weakened the threads and caused the number 1 cylinder head to leak, but I didn't realize it at the time, even though there were obvious clues. That bang is the thermostat overheating and turning into a snake. I immediately checked the valve lash again and found the valve clearance problem as well as the destroyed thermostat. I removed the thermostat and readjusted the valves. On my first few test drives, everything seemed to operate okay. Then after I took it on the freeway, it seemed to be running hot. As I got off the freeway, I noticed the red oil light flickering and idle. I sped up the engine a little and the light went out, but it wasn't running well. I got home and felt the dipstick and it was really hot. I didn't know what was wrong yet, but I knew I didn't want to pull the engine again if I didn't have to. The first thing I did was make sure the engine flaps were fully open. When the thermostat failed, it bent the flap control rod. I wired the flaps fully open. At the same time, I inspected the cooling air path to make sure I hadn't gotten any debris into it that would have caused clogging. Since the engine compartment seemed hot, I added insulation between the engine tin and the intake manifold preheat tube. The old insulation wasn't in very good condition, so I thought I might be getting a little blow-by there. Since it was still running hot, I read that the 120 standard main jet on the Solex Brazil 30/31 PICT carburetor might run a little lean, so I put in a slightly larger 127 main jet. I also checked the timing with a timing light and found it was a few degrees too advanced. As you might remember from my previous video, my timing light wasn't working, so I had to set the timing statically. After I fixed the light, I adjusted the spark to 0 degrees before top dead center. The next thing I did was to install the smallest of my generator belts on the engine. The idea was to keep the diameter of the generator pulley as small as possible, thus ensuring the generator fan is running as fast as possible. All the previous things helped a little, but what made the biggest improvement were the tweaks I made to the oil system. I had noticed that there was very little oil going to the number 1 and 2 valve cover. Unmodified VWs are notorious for low oil flow there, but I felt there was some additional pluggage going on. I started out by removing the oil relief plunger, and it was hanging up in the engine block. If it stuck in the open position, it would bypass the oil cooler at low speeds. After I got the plunger out, I polished it up as well as cleaning and polishing the bore in the crankcase. Before I reinstalled the plunger, I blew out the valve lifter oil galleries. I used 1/4 inch copper tubing with a gentle radius attached to an air valve. I removed the rocker arm assembly and the push rods. Since oil only flows to each valve when the valve is open, I rotated the engine until each lifter raised, and I pushed the other ones closed. Then I inserted the copper tube into each lifter and forced air in backwards through the lifters. Eventually, I got good airflow through the lifters, and I hoped whatever crud was in there was gone. The work on the oil circuit helped the oil cooler work much better, but the engine was still overheating. I had exhausted all my quick fix ideas, and I knew I had to pull the engine again. At this point, I thought the engine might have had too high a compression ratio, which was causing the engine to run hot. I would have to remove the cylinders and heads to check that out. Thanks for joining me today. We tried fixing my overheating problems without removing the engine from the car again. Unfortunately, I had only limited success, and I wound up pulling the engine again. However, these fixes might help you if your overheating problems are not quite as bad. Next time, I'll dive back into the engine to determine why it was still overheating. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If not, give it a thumbs down. And leave a comment or suggestion for things to do. I hope to do more of these videos, so please subscribe and click on the bell for notifications of new videos. Let's get together next time for another day in Life with David. See you soon!